Today we're going to create an expense reporting application. Like in any spreadsheet web application, we first design it in Excel. So let's start with our fields. So what type of fields, what type of data fields do we need in an expense reporting application? I'd like to capture the purpose of that. I'd like to capture the name of the user submitting the report, department, okay. So basically, we're creating the whole thing in Excel. So as department, I'd like to choose department information from a drop-down list. So I want the drop-down list to consist of things like accounting, administration, customer support, let's say finance department, human resources, IT, marketing, and let's also add sales. So let's call this list department. So these are simple Excel features. So I'm going to create a drop-down list here. Just going to go here, create data validation, choose list, and select our list department. Perfect. Another field I'd like to capture is attachment, like any type of file attachments I would like to capture in this application. So I'm going to call this attachment field. It's important in spreadsheet web applications, every single field has to have a name. So in other words, I need to define a name for purpose cell, for name cell, for department, and attachment. But I already put my names on the column on the left-hand side. So Excel has a nice feature that I can go to formulas, create from selection. So it's basically going to populate all these name ranges with the cells on the left column. So if I select this, as you can see, it picked purpose, name, department, attachment. These are the names that were assigned to these fields. Next thing I'd like to do is create a data table where the user would enter actual items, expense items. So I would like to capture date. I would like to capture description, category, and let's also obviously put amount. Okay, so this will be a table, and let's say I want, let's say up to, let's count to 20 rows of data. And then in the end, I'm going to put a sum column, sum here, so I want to be able to sum all of these data that the user will enter into these fields. I'd also like to format my data, which will come handy later on. So I'm going to put short date here, and I'm going to select currency in this column. And I also like to make category a drop down. So let's add some categories. Let's say airfare, one category, lodging, another category, ground transportation, meals and tips, phone, conference, and let's also put miscellaneous. And I'm going to call this list category. Right, perfect. So now I'm going to do the same thing for category field here. I will go to data, select data validation, make it a list, and select these guys here. Perfect. So if I copy it down, now I have all of my data fields where I can enter description, whatever it might be, select the category, and select the value. Okay, formulas are working fine, so it works as expected. It's very important to, again, name range this grid, and I'm going to call this expenses. Okay, we also have another field here, the total, so I'm going to call it total expense. So now my sort of Excel form is ready. I have all of the fields that I would like to capture: purpose, name, department, attachment. I have my data grid here for entering individual items, and then I have my formula here which sums up all of the amounts. So all I need to do is save it. Now switch to the web interface. So this is SpreadsheetWeb's login panel. So I'm going to log in with my user, and I'm going to create a new application. Create new application. From the application list, select designer. Next. So I'm going to find that file that I just created, and I'm going to drag and drop it. This is the file that I just created here. Drag and drop. Expense report. Hit next. Just going to select them. Folder here. And now the file is uploaded. Remember, the Excel file is like our template. So all of the fields are defined in the Excel template. It's also kind of the basis for the entire database for this application that I'm creating. Now I need to design my user interface. It's going to be pretty easy. Go to the user interface. So what I'm going to do, I can drag and drop each fields here, but there is an easy way. So go to this tab and select sheet. So it will basically pull all name ranges from sheet 1 and generate the controls associated with those. So you can see that it got me all of the controls. If I bring the Excel file, you'll see that, remember, I had the purpose. Move it up. I have the name. I have the department, which is a drop down, and I have attachments. So I'm going to bring the attachments to the bottom. I have the data grid here, so let's make sure everything is in place. I have date, description, category, and amount, but I would like category to be drop downs. So I'm going to go here and change mask type to list. So it's going to ask me what that list is going to be. Remember, I created a category list in the Excel workbook. So it's basically picking the category list and hit submit. Perfect. So I'm going to also submit it. So now it's a list. I also would like to bring my total field here. So I'm going to bring the total. I'm going to choose the total expenses and hit submit. Okay, let's preview the application. It's basically now creating the user interface. So this is the user interface. It looks pretty good, but I'd like to make a few changes. I would like to change this grid type so that it's not going to show me all 20 rows. It's going to show me as many rows that I need to enter. So I'll basically add rows, the concept of, okay, add a new one, add a new one. So I'm going to close this and go back to this. All I need to do is to change the input method to form base start empty grid and hit submit. Okay, the type has changed. Let's preview again. Let's see how it will look. All right, perfect. So this is exactly what I wanted. So essentially, all I need to do is hit new. So it's giving me the fields. So it's basically a pop-up form that I will enter date, description, category, and the dollar amount. All right, the user interface looks good. One thing I'd like to do, of course, I need to change this attachment field. So I'm basically gonna delete this because there's a special attachment field. So I need to grab the file upload and select the name here, attachment. All right, now you can choose a number of different things. You can choose the maximum size that it will allow. You can choose the accepted file types. You can choose how many files that it can accept. So I'm going to make it up to 5. Let's make it 10, up to 10 attachment, because each one of these expenses can have a different bill that you may need to scan and upload. So I'm going to make 10. Hit submit. Perfect. So the form is ready. Next step is the database. Database is also pretty simple. We're going to go to the database tab. I'm going to add a new table. I'm going to call it main table. Okay, let's add the field. So there's an easy way of doing this. So basically I want to capture all of the inputs in the application. In other words, add used columns. If I select add used column, it will grab all of the used fields in the application. Department is one of them. I'm going to leave it as string. The next one is name. I'll leave it as string also. Purpose. Total expense. I want to change total expense to decimal. File attachment. And that's it. Now remember, we also have a table data, but that table data is an unknown number of rows. So that we're going to create as a secondary table. Add new. I call this expenses. And that's going to be a one-to-many table because it's a grid. Create the table. So it's asking me which name range. Remember, we have a name range called expenses. So I'm going to pick that. We have headers there. Hit next. Okay, so it detects all the columns and the column types. Remember, I formatted that column. There was a reason for that, because if I format it, the system will detect the format types. It detected as date time. Next. Description, string. Category, string. And amount should be decimal. Hit finish. So we have the database. I'm going to go back to my user interface and add a button to the application. And then I will associate this button with ability to save. All you need to do is to select save from this selection, so that every time a user hits submit, the data that is entered will be stored in the database. Hit submit. Our application is pretty much ready. Now I can do some things like, let's say I'm going to apply a style sheet. Okay, so I can choose one of the style sheets from the list. So these are some of the style sheets. So I'm going to pick, let's say, let's pick this one. Call the style, hit update. Now the style sheet is applied. Let's do a quick preview. Let's see how it will look. Now it's loading the application with the style sheet that was applied. And this is how it will look. Not bad. So if I'm happy with it, all I need to do is to publish. Once the application is published, now it can be shared with your users. You can, it's going to produce a URL. You can put that URL on your website, or you can send that URL to your users so they can submit their expense reports using that URL. Okay, here we go. We have our application. If I click on that, so now it's loading the application. You see, this is the URL. So let's enter some data. So let's say we have a conference, and let's say I'm entering this data for myself. Smith, department, let's say I'm in marketing department. So I'm going to add, okay, so this is, let's say, from last week, 25th, description, car rental, okay, ground transportation, let's say 299, it's safe, okay, you see, it's entered here. Automatically, the total expense is summing things up. So if I add another one, let's do 25th, lunch. Select meals, say it's $18, it's safe. Let's do another one, the same day. Let's do, say, dinner. Meals, 44. Okay, everything is being updated. Calculations. If I have some files to attach to it, the receipts, I can simply drag and drop them here. If not, all I need to do is to hit submit, and the data is already submitted in the database. How do you see the submitted data? Go back to your application, click this view data icon, and you'll see a list of records in the database. You see this, I have one record. Let's add another one. Let's add a few. So we populate the database. Call this customer visit. Let's disguise one of the other employees. Let's say this is submitted by Jane Doe. Jane Doe is from sales department. Okay, train ticket, ground transportation, $75. Okay, hit submit. Okay, go back to the list, refresh. Now we have another record. So I want to see not the departments, but the person's name there. Okay, so I need to select name from the list. Okay, now I can customize the data list here. So we have two expense reports submitted by one by Paul Smith, the other one by Jane Doe. Let's talk about how you can analyze the data, the expense report data. SpreadsheetWeb has a nice feature for that, a reporting or data visualization feature. So I'm going to go to the applications page, create a new application. This one is a dashboard application. So I'm going to call this expense dashboard, expense report. So it's basically going to read the data from expense reports database. Hit next. Okay, demo group. All right, so let's create the dashboard. So essentially this is a drag and drop type of interface. So I can drag and drop different types of visualizations, charts, maps, diagrams, whatever works for that data. What I'd like to do typically is to drop a data grid. So I want this data grid to include the name of the person. So these are all of the fields from the database. Remember, we have two tables. One is expenses table, the other one is a main table. In the expenses table, we have 4 fields: amount, category, date, description. So I'm going to pick them one by one: description, category, and amount. Hit save. Here it is. There are only fewer entries here, but that's okay. As your database grows, as your database is populated, this is going to go up. Let's also create a chart. Let's have a look at, let's say, uh, expenses by department. Okay, so I'm going to put department, and I'm going to put the amount, and I would like to take the sum of amounts by department. So that's essentially what this chart entails. Here it is. So marketing department so far expense $361, sales department expense $75. We can also create another chart by category. So let's do a donut chart. Let's select the amount, and so let's select the category, right? This is what I want to select: category and amount, and then I want to sum the amount by category. Here we go. We have $62 on meals and tips and $374 on ground transportation. Let's put this right here and save the dashboard. Now, as you enter data into the system, this dashboard will be updated. So let's close this, go back to our expense report, and create another expense, and then we'll see the report. So let's say this one is a vendor visit. Let's say Andy Dawson. Department, let's say customer support. Let's do lunch today. Meals, $55, and calculate it to be, and then after that I will hit submit to save the results back into the system. Okay. Hit submit. Record is saved. Let's go back, check our records. Our record list will show an additional expense report from Andy Dawson. Perfect. Now let's go to our dashboard through the applications list and see the additional records from Andy Dawson. There we go. Here it is, Andy Dawson's from customer support. a $55 expense added to the category of customer support. So that's how easy it was to create an expense report on SpreadsheetWeb. Thank you for watching.